star before. This is what it looks like. It is an open source spec for a VR headset, an AR headset specifically, and it's the kind that has like a reflective surface in front of your eyes, and then two screens on either side, like right here, that point toward the reflective screen. And as a result, like you have this really big field of view. So I'd never tried it on before the conference, and there was somebody giving demos, but I actually ended up trying on 2 different ones at the conference. Both of them had pretty terrible SLAM, but I don't know that SLAM was like even possible until this year. Like, so the SLAM is all open source, and it's built on in this project Monado. And the hand tracking was pretty new as well. And the guy that talked about the hand tracking, that was a fascinating talk. That might have been the best one. Maybe not the best one, but it was a really interesting talk. He talked about how, like, he had access to 2 or 3 different, it's all using machine learning. So it's artificial intelligence, like learning to track your hands. And so for machine learning, you always have like a data set. Like the more images that you can put into your data set, the better the AI is going to be on the other end that comes out and does the hand tracking. And so he talked about like how he had access to like 2 or 3 different commercial data sets that were all terrible. They basically didn't use them at all because one of the big problems with these big data sets for AI is that you have to have good, like you have to tell each image what is in each image, right? And so like, they just had issues with the data not matching up, or like some would have it and some wouldn't, or whatever, like all of them, all the commercial ones. And so he ended up making up his own data set using Blender. So like basically this hand tracking is trained on images from a Blender model of hands, like lots of different Blender models of hands in random positions, in random environments with random lighting. And so it's like, I don't know how many millions of images, but I thought that was a super interesting like way that they trained up this AI. Sadly, I have, I don't know if you can even tell in the light, you probably can't, but I have vitiligo. And so my hands actually have like white patches on them. And the hand tracking did not work for me at all. Like it was like the hands would just like drift away. And then I would watch someone else put it on, and it would work perfectly for them. And it was like, so he was there, and he's like, I might have to like think about like making some models that have like patchy skin. It's just an interesting thing. Yeah, I mean, I could have put on gloves. I didn't try that. But the SLAM was also pretty terrible, but at least it kind of worked. Like, I mean, it wasn't bad. It was bad. It was probably about the same level as like if you've used, what is the PlayStation one, PSVR. It was like similar to PSVR, in my opinion, which is probably the worst of the commercial like SLAM solutions out there. So a lot of the talks also touched on OpenXR, which is basically an open standard for XR, and it's being adopted by the headset manufacturers, right? So I think kind of slowly, or like maybe like piecemeal, like some of them adopted it, some are saying they're going to adopt it. Essentially, like, it's in progress. The standard, I think, is not in progress, but the adoption is very much in progress. And there's all these cool projects. Monado is essentially an implementation of OpenXR on Linux, which means that basically, like, if Monado supports your headset and your headset supports OpenXR, you will be able to use that headset on Linux, right? Like, people can write applications in Linux that are against the OpenXR spec, and then that will work in Linux because if your headset supports OpenXR. So it's pretty interesting project, and like there's a lot of, it's like moving fast right now because it's all, I think like, it feels to me like all of this open source XR stuff is like lagging a couple years behind the commercial solutions that have been worked on for, probably like 4 or 5 years, right? Like, so it's like there's like this delay before people can get it to, write their own drivers and like get it all working. But it feels like it's starting to get real. Like it's like a lot of the stuff was like, okay, yeah, like this is really happening. There was only one talk on Godot, but it was really cool. I am a big proponent of Godot, so it's like basically like Unity, but it's an open source Unity. So in the same way that Blender is becoming like more and more taken seriously by all industries because it's like a real thing and it's like kind of caught up to a lot of the commercial solutions, I think Godot is going to be there real soon. And some people would say it's already there. Godot, there's all kinds of these projects getting VR to work in Godot, and that's a lot of the, if you're building an XR application with a lot of assets, a lot of 3D assets, you need something like Unity or Godot to like position your assets and stuff. And so people are now using Godot for that. Some people call Godot Godot, which I'm just not one of those people. I don't know which is right. This project VSakai, if I'm probably not saying that right, was also interesting. So I think you build it out of Godot, and it had like a lot of Godot components that like were part of the Sakai project. But essentially, it's like sort of the equivalent of like what's the web one from Google, like the Web XR thing that Rem5 was doing a project in it. I can't remember. It felt like that. Like it's like a platform. You can host it yourself because it's completely open source, and it's meant to be like a multiplayer VR platform.
Oh, kind of like Mozilla Hubs?
Yeah. Is that the one that you guys were using? I thought there was a Google one, but I was, yeah.
Yeah, we used to use Hubs.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, that's a kind of a neat thing to go look at. So the other thing that was like kind of cool to me was that there's this project StereoKit. I'd never heard of it before. It's a C# project that's like code first, so it's really just code. There's no like, you don't have to use it with Unity. It's just like a library or whatever, and you can write not open. I don't know if it's open source actually. I have no idea. It must be because there was a talk about it at this open source conference. But it's being written by a guy who works at Microsoft, so it has really good support for the HoloLens, but it also supports like a ton of different headsets. And it's like just a C# library you can write your VR applications in. And then on top of StereoKit is this thing called DOFDev. And I'm going to click through. We'll see if that works. Because DOFDev, the website has all these cool, I thought they were GIFs, but they're not. They're actually like web videos. And they kind of show off all these interactions. So like you get this like, these are sort of like VR interactions that you get with this project. So you can just like go download this, and you can use StereoKit and this project, and you can use these interactions. So the stretch cursor is basically just like a bow interaction. So like you would click, and then I don't know if you have to click both hands. I'm not exactly sure what the interaction is, but essentially like you get a cursor, and the farther apart you stretch your hands, like the cursor is kind of exponentially farther out. So he actually like demoed this one in real life, and it was like, oh, that is really intuitive. So it's a way to like grab stuff in VR from farther away than just what you can reach with your hands. I was like, oh, that's really smart. I have never seen it before. Apparently that sort of like made this project. It's like a lot of people use the project just for the stretch cursor. But there's also like all this other stuff for it. This one, super interesting. So you can have a volume that you kind of define, and then you just have a window into it. But then you can also like change the dimensions of the window. Like that's all part of this API. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And he actually was demoing like you can like make it big and then step into it, and you're in this other environment. So it's a little bit like a portal kind of an API. I'm not exactly sure. It's called Oriel. But there's a ton of them. Like here's one that's just like, here's how you attach something like, in front of your headset. I don't know. I actually don't, that's all I'm going to talk about. But it's kind of a neat little UI library basically built on top of StereoKit. I can't press, okay. Sure. This is just an anecdote, just a little anecdote, but I was sitting in front of he was not giving a talk, this guy that wrote Lover. So Lover is a Lua library for, also code first library for writing VR applications. And I was just like, happened to be sitting in front of him. I'd met him because he was doing this demo. The demo was on an Oculus Go. So I mean, it was like really kind of old school tech, and I was like, all right, cool. But Lover is a neat project if you haven't seen it before. Anyway, I was chatting with someone in Slack, and we were talking about this project, and I remembered it from GDC in like, I don't know, like maybe like 2010 or 12 or something. And it was cool. It was like this sand table. Like it was like a table with literally sand in it, and then a projector like down on the table, and as you like dug a trench, there'd be water in that trench, and you could make a mountain, and then it would show a mountain. And what they were demoing there was a real-time strategy game. So this real RTS that you played by like moving the sand around, and I was like, that's so cool. And so I just happened to be chatting about it, and then it was between sessions, and I was just like lamenting to everyone around me that I could not think of this project. I had been Googling it for like 10 minutes, couldn't find it. And he's like, oh, I worked on that. It's called SimTable. And then he like pulled up the website, and they've completely pivoted now. They're just like for firefighting preparedness. Like that's what they do now. But he was like, yeah, I worked at that company for like 4 years. It was just a weird coincidence. That's really it. So here's some other random links in addition to all the other ones. I will put this on my Twitter, I guess, maybe. But that was it. Does anyone have any questions about the conference, my conference experience? Please.
So when they were talking about the hand tracking and the SLAM, why weren't they just using Ultraleap stuff?
So actually, Ultraleap sponsors their project. And so they were working with Ultraleap on this project. So I think it is like it's, actually, I don't really know.
It's
Yeah.
because they wanted to open source the data set, I think, is the main reason.
And the like original
And
Ultraleap stuff isn't.
Ultraleap has some number of proprietary data sets that they train on.
Yeah.
And I think, the main product was like open sourcing the whole stack.
The whole stack. Yeah, so the guy who actually gave that talk, I shouldn't say guy. I don't know if it was. Yeah, it may not have been a guy. Anyway, that person at the conference had a Project North Star headset, and I don't know the extent of what this meant, but somebody said that it was like the first, or maybe like one of the first few headsets built entirely on an open source stack. So all the software was open source and all the hardware was open source. Now I don't know if that means like, how could there be open source cameras? Are there open source cameras? I'm not sure. It definitely had cameras. I don't know if they were off the shelf or if they were truly open source as well. But certainly like the headset itself was like 3D printed. It was all of his design, because you can modify the Project North Star like schematics, and I mean, you can basically just download them and 3D print them yourself, and you can obviously modify them as much as you want. And so his was like fully kitted out with like USB hub on the back, and so you could just unplug components and plug them in, and it was pretty neat. Yeah?
You had said earlier about the machine learning regarding the finger tracker.
Yeah.
And you said it worked really well for some people. What was the latency on that? Was that an issue? Or, I mean, it seems like machine learning, if it's an inference machine, it would be faster, but if it's trying to learn as it's going along, it would be slow.
Oh, it was not doing the learning in real time. So the learning all happens like, over, in the previous part of the project. And then and this is true of most machine learning actually, is what you end up with is like almost like a binary. Like you compile the learning into a file, and these files are often gigs and gigs, like they're huge files. And then you have the software that you're running like knows how to use that file and find a solution like really fast inside that giant file. So, and that's true of a lot of machine learning. So the machine learning happens like, it might take weeks, right? Like, because they're using this huge data set and you're running, iterations over it, and then you end up with this giant file that is like all of the things the machine learned.
So it's just doing the inference on the user side. Is it still, the latency still pretty good?
Yeah, as far as I could tell, it was like really good for some people. It was not good for me. Like it would just like fly away. But actually, like it seemed like it could still tell where my fingers were. It was that it couldn't keep them on my hand. And I didn't use it too much because it was frustrating, and I was like, okay, well, it doesn't work for me. But as far as I could tell, it seemed like it was really good for other people.
Do you have a problem with the Quest 2 head tracking?
I have not tried the hand tracking. I did try it on the Quest 2 early on, and it wasn't great. And I don't know, yeah, now I like question, like, was it just because it's me? Like, I don't know.
That's really interesting, because I would think shadows would do the same thing in terms of like, I mean, if you're standing by a tree that's.
Right, if you're in dappled light, I don't know for sure.
It would be the same.
But I mean, I think like, especially in those early days, like they definitely stressed like how you need good light from multiple sources, maybe even. Yeah, so I don't know. Anything else? Thanks. Clap for myself.
Nobody claps for me but me.
I will be the clapper.
For the stream, we got started a little bit late, so the only thing you missed was you ran.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Start of every meeting, so we're not doing that. I'll show you the order. One of these tabs and stuff. Oh yeah. Hey stream, you couldn't hear me. This is harder than it looks. We had a little technical problem, so we started late. We started the live presentation, but all you missed was me going over the intro. And I'm not going to do that again, but just wanted to show here's the order of what's happening. So Marty just talked about the free open source software XR conference, and now I'm going to talk about new XR hardware real briefly, just to kind of lay the groundwork so that Paul can come up here and talk about actually using the Quest Pro for a month, because he was. He didn't really use it for a month, but you know, it sounds good. He had pre-release access and had a launch title he's going to talk about. And then we're just going to spend the rest of the time on MetaConnect. There's so much to talk about, and there's so many opinions all over the internet. And encourage folks to speak up. We've got a second mic that will just point at you, so it shows up on the stream. We like to keep things interactive, especially with not too huge of a group, so just pipe up at any point. So, let's see. One of these. Let's just close a few of these. How about? All right, this is me. Hey, I'm Zach. I'm going to talk very quickly about new XR hardware. Kind of in the order it's come out. So, hopefully, everybody's familiar with the Quest Pro. It's by far the most popular headset of all time for VR. Estimates around 10 million sold. Yeah. You know, Quest 2. And so there's a company called Pico that's been kind of competing, but mostly just in China. They got bought by ByteDance, who makes this thing called TikTok that makes a lot of money. And now they're competing directly against Meta, Facebook, whatever they're called this month. And the way that you know is because they've subsidized the prices of the Pico 4 down here at the bottom. So interestingly, Meta had to actually raise the price of the Quest 2. So some would say it's maybe not subsidized anymore. It went from $300 US to $400 just this year. It's always been slightly higher in Europe, but you can see that the Pico has come out now 2 years later with updated optics and screens and so on, and kept the same price. So that is subsidized. They are competing directly on money. And they're not selling in the US, so tough nuggies. There are people on Reddit that have imported them, and I think their plan is pretty much only to use it for PC VR. Virtual Desktop, which is the most popular app to connect your Quest to your PC, and Steam VR is also on Pico 4. And I believe there's some piracy going on too, but the software exists for that. And obviously you won't get any kind of support, but you know, you'd go to Reddit anyway when you had a problem. So if that sounds interesting, some of the things you can note is all the specs are better at the same price. The screens, the lenses. I'll talk about these more in a minute, but these new Pancake lenses are dramatically better than anything we've ever had as a consumer. The field of view, even the IPD range supported. And this is a fun one. 62 is not small enough to sell this to the public. It actually goes to 58 millimeters, but you have to click an agreement that says you realize it might pinch your nose as it does that. And some people, it pinches their nose, and some people are super happy. With these new lenses, they're very forgiving, though, if it's not directly lined up. So much so that on Quest Pro, I can't tell when I'm in the sweet spot, because basically the whole thing is. But then the eye tracking software kicks in. It's like, move your headset up a little bit. That's good. Now push the lenses together. That's good. It doesn't talk, but that's how I hear it in my head. So that's a Pico 4.
What's the glyph next to the headphone jack?
Glyph headphone jack. That used to be an X. It didn't paste right. As in not. It's a no. And then Pico 4 Enterprise will be sold in the US. What is it? The exact same thing, plus eye tracking and a little camera there in the nose cutout for mouth tracking, and then a gold thing on the front. And it's going to cost more. This was just announced at AWE Europe. And it gets a little confusing. In fact, the guy that introduced it accidentally called it the Pico 4 Pro, because the Pico 4 Pro is what you can buy in China that is identical and costs less. Pico 4 Enterprise is for Europe and eventually the US. But this $900 is half the price of what Oculus is selling, the Oculus Quest, sorry, what Meta is selling the Quest Pro for. Maybe you'll have a new name soon. That's right. And people say, oh, Zuckerberg bad, Facebook bad, but also Chinese government investment bad. They at least know what people care about, and they are getting ISO certifications. And I'm not qualified to say if those are good certs or not, but one's related to security and one's related to privacy and how data is used and move around and how you agree to let it move around. That's right, they do, yep. Yeah, and so here's how things stack up, and it's pretty illegible. These are the other enterprise headsets, including the Quest Pro. When you see, oh my God, Quest Pro is $1,500, well, the Vive Focus, the most popular, the Vive Focus 3, the most popular VR headset for enterprise, is $1,300. Then you have to buy separately the eye and face tracking. So that's exactly what they aim their price at. It would have been nice if they had copied the replaceable battery on the back, but they didn't, for whatever reason. And the only things to note here, I guess, would be that really the Quest Pro didn't get upgraded screens. It's not a substantial difference, but it is a difference. And it's the only one that got a little bit of a bump on CPU performance, and it's got the most RAM by far. So multitasking or just loading really big models. And the face tracking isn't comparable. There's a lot more work and a lot more cameras that go into it on the Quest Pro, but how much do you need? Depends on your use case. The major features on the Quest Pro, I'll just knock these out so Paul doesn't have to. Here it is. It's a VR headset, but by default, don't really block out the outside world. It just kind of sits in front of your face. And I picked this image to kind of show that that also means you can fit any kind of size of glasses. You can adjust how far the VR lenses are away from your glasses. And then the rest of the thing sitting there is very, very thin because the whole battery is moved to the back now, and that also balances out the weight. So you can add in these little just rubber and magnet light blockers. These only go on the side, and then they're going to sell a very controversial one that does a full VR kind of a block. But there'll also be third-party things on Amazon within minutes here selling you magnets and silicone, which is probably the one you want to buy. The official one's $50 and due in December. The big deal is the pancake lenses. Like, you can literally hold your head still and move your eyes and read text. That's never happened with Fresnel lenses. And like I said, all those cameras for eye and face tracking, other people have one for each eye and one for the mouth. On the Quest Pro, there's one for your whole forehead, eyebrows, wrinkles, things like that. One for each eye, and then kind of two for your nose and mouth area. And so you can do things like move your cheeks, move your mouth side to side. We'll have some videos. And for a giant-headed person like myself, the IPD is physically adjustable and now goes wide enough that I can actually see and run and view Quest 2 titles that I couldn't do on a Quest 2 headset. And that's really one of the unspoken things is there's a huge software library for that Quest 2 that'll run on here. And if you're an enterprise, there's some portion that are going to buy software, and we'll talk more about what got announced at the conference. And there's some portion that will build it from scratch. And those people have endless funds for hardware because developers cost hundreds of dollars an hour, so there's no comparison. And then just kind of a little bump on compute, and doubled the RAM from the Quest 2. And there's some new controllers, and they're crazy, so I'll just let them talk about it. Hopefully we got audio. Probably if I do this.
Powerful VR controllers
All right.
to date. Touch Pro controllers represent our most powerful VR controllers to date. Most importantly, the Touch Pro controllers are self-tracked, and this allows us to remove the tracking rings, and users never have to think about tracking. It just seamlessly works.
That's these guys here.
The Touch Pro controllers represent a big step forward in terms of haptic capabilities. Unlike previous touch controllers, which contain a single linear resonant actuator, the Touch Pro controllers contain 3 haptic devices. One
This is not marketing, this is a developer technical breakout. That's why he's talking like that.
and 2 LRA haptic devices. One in the index trigger and one in the new thumb rest.
Using acronyms, so.
The LRA haptic devices allow you to deliver haptic feedback at the location that most makes sense. Meanwhile, the VCM haptic device allows for the most complex and realistic haptic effects we've ever had via their ability to play audio-like PCM data. The index trigger is another area of significant improvement. In addition to the LRA haptic device, the trigger now contains sensors to detect finger curl and slide. As you can see in this video, the movement of the user's index finger is translated into VR more accurately than ever before. The thumb rest is another area where we've added functionality to the Touch Pro controllers. In addition to the LRA haptic device, the thumb rest also contains a pressure sensor. When combined, input from the index trigger and thumb rest can be used to enable a precision grip interaction. Precision grip enables a natural and intuitive pinch interaction in VR. In addition, precision grip also enables a secondary interaction of applying pressure to held objects. It's also possible to enable simultaneous tracking of hands and controllers.
We've wanted that forever, yep.
This means that in the future, developers will be able to build new experiences using any combination of hands and controllers at the same time. Next, while the Touch Pro controllers come with the lanyards we're all familiar with, these lanyards are removable and replaceable with stylus tips. These connect with a pressure-sensitive sensor in the base of the controller. Once you flip the controller around, this allows you to use the Touch Pro controller as a pen-like device.
That'd be going like this and pushing on stuff.
It's pressure-sensitive as well. The stylus tip improves the writing experience by enabling accurate contact point detection with real-world surfaces. Surfaces like desks and walls, of course, but this can also apply to any object, allowing you interactions like tracing objects into VR.
And that's a huge deal because they don't let you access the camera data. So if you think back to the making of Jurassic Park or whatever 3D thing you saw in the 80s where they would have a clay model and just go touch, 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 touch. That's probably what I will end up doing for furniture. Yeah, so the press at a pre-conference event got to try this precision grip demo that we don't have yet, and they were very impressed. It's the combination of being able to move your finger and then get feedback on each finger separately for the first 2 fingers plus the whole rest of your hand. They thought it was a big deal, and they kind of said that, you know, hand tracking won't have any feedback for a long time. This is a really good limited sort of hand tracking that does have feedback. And when they say hands, they mean hand tracking and controllers at the same time. It's always been either or, where you have to sit down your controllers, put them to sleep, and start using your hands on Quest 2. And that is going to come to both Quest 2 and Quest Pro if you buy the controllers, which are actually compatible with Quest 2. They'll be sold separately for $300. And when they say hands and controllers, they're thinking of set them down, pick them up, use them, set them down. And of course, we're thinking hands and controllers on your feet, so you have tracked feet. And then you go to your backyard and get on the trampoline. True story.
You said it before any of us could,
I know. I haven't done it yet, but I have gone outside. Yeah, so that's kind of the controllers. Whoops, that's what that button does. How do I go forward? All right. And yes, they do work outside. That is the thing you're not supposed to do, demonstrated by one of their launch partners in full sunlight. You can see the light on his hand. You can see the shadow from the controller. They work great. Contrast that with today. You go in your garage, you open the garage door. If it's daytime, use controller tracking on the Quest 2 as soon as you face the open garage door.
It works great if the sun fries the cameras.
There are risks, there are, and I'm not going to be the one to do it first. The other huge feature is color pass-through, and this will hopefully start at the right spot. So Quest 2 had grayscale pass-through. They actually just adapted the tracking cameras with software to show you something like what you're seeing, but they're not positioned where your eyes are, so they have to do some corrections. And at a distance, they're great, and anything closer than this, everything's swimmy and wrong, and that's still the case a little bit, but now there's more detail and more color. And Norm probably has the best review online. See a little distortion on his hands there.
Because they're not HDR cameras. It's taking the color image from the center camera and then superimposing it over the projected environment that the two SLAM cameras in the front are generating. It's interesting. You can actually pass your hand over the center camera and it then kind of transitions back to a grayscale image. And once you remove the obstruction over the center, the color sweeps back in. The color is meaningful. It means I can recognize more objects in my space. The continuity between what I see in the headset that pass through and what I see outside the left, right, and the bottom of the headset just feels more like they're a piece of the same environment. The resolution, though, leaves a bit to be desired. And while it is an improvement over the pixelated, the kind of fuzzy resolution that you see in the grayscale pass-through of the Quest 2, it's nowhere near high enough that I think I could be comfortable taking a piece of paper and reading comfortably without having it close to my face. I tried reading the back of a book, and I had to really kind of squint and move it around to recognize it. It's readable, yes, comfortable to read.
So that's Norm from the Tested channel, which has a whole lot of that Adam guy, what's his last name? From Mythbusters? Adam Savage, yep. He's one of the best in the biz, and he gets a lot of access because of it. So yeah, it exactly mimicked what I had experienced. It's only about double the detail, the Quest 2, but that color is awfully handy. And it is fun to cover up that center camera and see, without its struggling with exposure, what the other cameras are actually seeing, because they're a lot faster. They can change their exposure on the fly. Whoops. I'll never learn. So this is an example. This is me. This is not a full lens. Did anybody get the pass-through capture working on the software? Paul, I think you mentioned how it works, but did you get it working?
Did I get it working? Like
To capture pass-through video?
capture pass-through on device? Yeah.
On device. Gotcha. Yeah, so I wasn't smart enough. When we planned this meeting, we had no idea when it was launching. It launched and shipped yesterday. I got 2 hours last night, 30 minutes today. So this is me holding my phone up to the lens and trying not to scratch it. But this is a good example. So this is not an atomic bomb. This is not sun coming straight in the window. This is a white sidewalk in the shade, but outdoors. So it always favors showing you the detail in the darker areas, and that's probably the right choice. You don't care about seeing a good lamp or a good bounce light off the ceiling or what's outside. You're not supposed to be thinking about outside with this headset. But if you go outside, which you agreed not to do when you configured the headset, then it's all bright and the exposure, the camera kicks in and knows exactly what to do. And this is direct sunlight on the headset. The shadows are nice, the colors are good. And you can kind of compare the resolution here a little bit. You know, compared to a rendered thing in there, telling you that you're doing unsafe stuff and you should stop. Maybe four pixels, you know, per 1 pixel of pass-through. So, but it's very promising, and it does work good outside. And like I said, I'm not going to be the one to wreck my headset. I've kind of got a theory that actually all the infrared cameras pointing at your face would be the first things to cook, because it's actually sort of hard to get a light to come in at the right angle to go through a lens and hit the screen. It's never happened with my Quest 2 or anything else. But I told you, don't do this. And then the other big one is eye tracking and face tracking. And one of the fun commentaries was, yeah, so they had this other demo with this like alien girl and super convincing, and then they showed us the new avatars, and that was a lot less good. So this is my theory why we don't have this when we launched the headset. Instead, we have to go look at some avatars, because this looks awfully good. This is all driven in real time by the user. It's all using linear blend shapes, facial action coding system, if you've ever done a face rig. So there's a lot of really nice data there. And the avatars are holding it back.
That sucked.
Hmm?
That sucked in the headset.
No, then the eyes would just be. And then finally, just the quick comparison, Quest 2 to Quest Pro, so you can see kind of how little has changed. Like I said, the big deal is the lenses. The field of view increase is actually a lot more for somebody with a large eye spacing or a large head like me. This 96 degrees was for the largest supported size of 68 millimeters, which is not large enough for me, so I shoved some plastic in there to force the lenses farther apart, and then I lost even more field of view on the outsides. So I would hazard that I had like a 95, 94 horizontal field of view. So stepping into this headset and then going back, it's very noticeable. And there's a nice wide range, and it's not 3 different settings, it's continuous between those. A nice screen, better colors, better contrast. This resolution is exactly what you do get on Quest Pro. This is approximately what you get in real life on the Quest 2. The official panel is wider than that, but you don't ever get to see those pixels, not in any setting. They're just kind of wasted. And then the refresh rate won't go to 120 hertz, which is a limitation of the panel, but really there's very few kinds of rendering that can go that fast. Doubling the RAM, like I said, it's the same chipset, but they kind of spread it out to get more cooling, and now the clock speed is a lot higher. I haven't seen any benchmarks. Have you? Nothing? Yeah. So that'll be something to look for to see how much more CPU you get. The GPU is already going almost max speed on the Quest 2. And then you'll get a 6 gigahertz network soon, early next year. That'll be nice for streaming PC stuff. And then the price triples for all that good stuff. And that's the difference between a subsidized consumer product with every corner cut and hating people with large heads, and kind of having every feature that you can kind of put in a headset today. Just the other ones to be aware of, the Lynx R1, which has now kind of missed their window. They had this whole gimmick down 2 years ago, but they were a Kickstarter, so they got bumped a lot of times in their manufacturing and their part suppliers. But that is truly designed for this pass-through mode. They've got completely different lenses than everybody else, and that is dramatically thin. And then the hand tracking is from Ultraleap, which is the fastest there is, faster than Quest, faster than Quest Pro. And they give you full access to the camera data, all the cameras. And they've got a low latency mode, so you can do some work on it and spit it out within 1 frame. And then the other one, if you're a gamer, PSVR 2. For the price of a Quest Pro, you can have a PS5, a PSVR 2 probably, and like 4 games. So that's definitely the way you want to go if you're into games, especially the AAA kind of games. And then the Quest 3, there's just stolen mock-ups and draft images of that. That's sometime in 2023. People think October because this conference happens in October every year. HTC just puts vague images out there and calls it marketing, and it's probably sooner than these other ones because there's already 2 Chinese brands on the market that are making this XR2 chipset, pancake lenses, and a rear battery. And then there's a software stack now that Snapdragon gives to everybody that buys an XR2, so they're all going to have that. The one that will probably be here is a Lenovo VRX, but that is enterprise priced. And they did have their conference, and they did announce the specs, except for the price. So it's not cheap. So I would expect HTC to make that. They were actually the first to market with these pancake lenses, but then they did something kind of crazy, and that was the HTC Flow that you have to hook up to a phone to get any power. And yeah, that's it. So now we're gonna get Paul up here, who has or has not used a Quest Pro for a month. Do you want anything for a visual, or do you just want to?
I don't know, we could show the...
It's probably still in here. World.io. You either clip you got a good pocket, you can just clip this on.
Multiple.
Pick your favorite.
This is my favorite pocket here.
Look there behind the tower. It's Paul. It's virtual Paul.
That's me. I work at World. I'm one of 3 developers there. And yeah, we were a launch title yesterday, so we just launched yesterday after I think the company's been around for a year and a half, 2 years, and everyone has been patiently and not so patiently waiting for it. But yeah, we launched yesterday, and so far so good. Let's see. Yeah, so we've been working with the Quest Pro for a few months. I don't remember exactly when it was. I didn't get one until a few weeks ago, but that coincided with our backend dev leaving and me inheriting the backend, so I didn't really get to do much Unity dev with it over the past few weeks. And yeah, just yesterday, I got it hooked up to the ODH, Oculus Developer Hub. All you need to do is just hook it up to that, register the device, and maybe set some video settings, just set which capture setting you want. And then it'll just magically record pass-through if you have pass-through on. So if you want to shoot a video from in the device with color pass-through, you have to pretend to be a developer, but it's pretty straightforward when you do it. I hopped in Worlds with one of my teammates because he spent a lot more time with the Quest Pro and integrating the super secret SDKs to get the new avatars and all that working. So I shot a video in there with him, had a little interview, but it only picked up my mic. The alternative would have been to only get app audio, and I could have recorded myself with one of my many microphones at home, but I waited till the last minute, so here I am. Yeah, I would say the biggest boon for development is just the ease of putting the thing on and taking it off. It's very casual, very not gonna mess up all your stuff. If you wear glasses, you put it right on over the glasses. Doesn't, bend your frames, smash your face. And when you're doing pass-through stuff, like for sure the periphery and the continuity between what your eyes are seeing out here and then what they're seeing here through the video, it for me and the rest of my team as well, they all say like it enhances the illusion because it's very like they kind of nailed it. Yeah, I don't have to reiterate what's already been said. Let's see. I was the first day I was playing with it. I was going up to the window outside, and it was all like super bright and blown out. But one fun observation was that it tries to do some depth mapping. That's what it seems like to me. So like, it was as if like there's this like tunnel of light headed out my window, and that was fun to play with because you move your head and it changes shape. And if you like messing with your experience and your perception, then you don't even need an app. You just walk around and like get your headset next to screens and just play around, get on the floor. I did, so I've been developing with a link cable on the Quest 2, and for me, pass-through works really well over the link cable on the Quest 2. My other teammates say no, not so much. I think they use AirLink a lot of the times, and it's always kind of hit or miss. The Quest Pro, I tried it one night, like last week, and it was just like totally unusable. I'm not sure if there's some advanced settings. I know there's like a there's like a tweaker kind of thing for where you could dial in settings for how much bandwidth you allow over link, and I didn't spend any time with that trying to dial it in, but it's more data, it's a larger image, it's color, so the link cable's already kind of at the limit, streaming VR, so sort of understandable, but sort of a bummer. Hopefully it works itself out. Let's see, what else?
While you're thinking about that, you want to just tell us about the app and
Yeah, I'll tell
what
you.
happened on launch day and all that good stuff?
Yeah. Oh, let me just play the trailer to show you what it's all about. So there's color pass-through captured on the device. Yeah, so developing day to day, last year I was a web developer, and we'd have stand-ups over Zoom that would always last too long, and you just get tired staring at a 2D screen and then staring more at a 2D screen while you're coding. And we barely ever do any video meetings at all. We will do voice over Discord, or we'll hang out in the app and have like social cues and like, hey, I know you're talking to me because you're looking at me, and then once we got the face tracking and all with the avatars, it was like just even better. We were just giddy like for days, just playing with our faces, or they were playing with their faces. I was watching from from over the network, all jealous. But yes, it's. I'm not so bothered by like the cartoony, weird meta avatars, because just like facial contact, eye contact, facial movements, all these micro kind of, all these micro expressions and stuff just come through really well. And it's just a great way to communicate and, you know, hang out in a space.
Did anybody try doing a custom character other than one of the avatars? Did anybody play with that?
Custom character?
Like your own model, your own rig?
Well, we started with our own very low poly avatars, but because ultimately we want to be cross-platform, but we just had to focus on integrating meta because they were just updating so fast, and you know, it was like just taking there's like three of us, so it was just taking all of our time to just keep up. No, we haven't tried to like hook into this skeleton or anything. We've done a little bit. So we have one UI feature where there's like this magic ring that you have. So if you're doing hand tracking, you've got a hand menu that you can open up like this, thanks to MRTK. But then we also have a ring that you just touch your thumb to, and it opens up like a little control center, and we've got a joystick you can move around, and some buttons and all. So to put the ring on, we had to kind of get into the skeleton and try and figure out when that's loaded and when it's not valid, and it's still, if you've worked with any of the Oculus SDKs, they're almost there, but it's still a bit rough, and like, I mean, there's a lot of magic, but it does feel like they've already moved on to something else without finishing this thing, and you kind of just have to read through some code and figure out what's what, try and figure out what is intended. They have docs, they have examples, but it's still kind of challenging.
You had mentioned your own thoughts on what you want to use face tracking for personally.
Yep. So I have an EWI, an electronic wind instrument. So you ever seen like, it's sort of like a Cantina band setup, and like you could. It's got a little silicone mouthpiece with a bite sensor and a pressure sensor and like woodwind fingering, and you can play synthesizers with it. I don't find it to be a perfect replacement for acoustic instruments because I really like to modulate tone with my mouth. And well, yeah, the next time I have some time on my hands, I'm gonna wire up all the facial tracking data to modulate some synthesizers to kind of see what I could do with that. So yeah, the avatars are one thing, but yeah, I'm really excited to just plug into that and just come up with weird, novel ways to control the app.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm most excited about, like why I do the most boring thing you could do with face tracking. Why not have things attached to your face that have physics and, you know, elephant trunks and whatever else.
Which, like, yeah, those my favorites. DK1 demo was that elephant game where you just have a trunk and you're moving along a parade, just whacking stuff.
Yep.
So yeah, I'd like to see more of that, just more weird, like very non-human faces. Yeah, we'll see where it goes.
What about the battery life and using
Battery
it for dev all
life.
day?
Yep. I would estimate, so I don't have the production model. I have a pre-release, so I'm not sure how it stacks up, but I think probably around 2 hours. Significantly less if you have face tracking on. It kind of eats up battery. And that's sort of the same case with, like, yeah, we have more CPU and all, but also face tracking takes a lot of CPU. So that's just hardware and operating systems filling the hardware.
But your PC can keep it powered all day?
I was in there most of the day yesterday just with a battery pack. PC keeping it powered is hit or miss. It depends on your motherboard, what USB you plug into, but that's the case with Quest 2 as well. Like, I've got a USB-C port on my motherboard, and it sort of keeps it from dying. It slows down the death a bit, but it doesn't keep it charged. I have to use an adapter and plug it into the USB 3 port right next to it to get to top it up. But yeah, yeah, I was in there pretty much all day with the battery pack, and I wasn't exhausted, and the battery pack slows juice. So.
Any other
yeah,
questions?
anything else?
This is my first exposure to this. It's absolutely awesome. Now, are you using Google Earth data for this?
Yeah, so this is about, yesterday we heard, I heard the phrase wander on steroids. I overheard just in the app like a bunch of times. It's a kind of a mishmash of Google Earth and wander. And, for the 3D data, we would love to use Google Earth, but they don't put it out there. So we're using Bing Maps. They have their own 3D data set, and they have a Unity SDK, which is quite friendly, quite easy to use. We're also using MRTK, which was developed for the HoloLens, I think, originally, and it works with the Quest and hand tracking, and it's a bit hard to get used to, but it's quite powerful, and the next version is going to be really, it's going to solve, like our main, we spent a few weeks just wrestling with Unity's 2D UI, which happens to be like the least performant thing. Fine with streaming in 3D graphics of the planet, but you put a 2D panel up and like your frame rate tanks, unless you just make sure like everything's using the same materials, and you make sure you're not even like masking. You're like just not drawing. Like it's a mess. It seems like we're in agreement there. But yeah, it's Bing 3D, and then we've got Google 360s, Street Views, just like, I think they're in the billions of Street Views that are available. and then we've got like hundreds of cities via Bing, and then we're working on acquiring just some other data sets to import in.
Was it like a pretty smooth integration to get the Google Street View working, or?
Yeah, so there's a package called UPano that does pretty much all the work of making the web requests, turning it into a, like getting all the, so Google Street Views, they come in like a, I think it's a square 512 by 512 texture, and depending on, I don't remember the details, but depending on which, they have various qualities, and you get more or fewer tiles that you can tile around, and UPano just handles all that. So yeah, quite straightforward there.
What's the platform that it's on for distribution?
Yep, Quest 2 and Quest Pro.
On the
So
store?
it's on the store as of yesterday.
How do you guys get on the store so fast? We were just working on it a couple weeks ago.
They're a launch title.
We're working, yeah, we're a launch title. We've been in QA for the past like month and a half. And yeah, that's how.
So with the Quest Pro, the Quest Pro, it seems like you get a nice performance boost in the Quest 2, like our apps that run better on it. What would your gauge be of the performance? We haven't had time to do benchmarking yet, but curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I haven't personally done any benchmarking, and like when we were doing benchmarking, it was with the dev kit, and it seemed like they didn't quite have the firmware all dialed in yet, so it was actually kind of worse for a while. Okay. But just like popping on the headset, my personal impression is things are slightly smoother, but mostly what I notice is just like better pass-through, and yeah, any apps that use pass-through, they're elevated now, just because the pass-through works better.
Is there any different features between the 2 and the Pro for your app?
For our app, I mean, just the color pass-through and face tracking, but like we don't want to exclude most of our user base. Like, yeah, we had a bunch of Quest Pro users in there yesterday and today, but because they're looking for things to try out their
one of the
fancy
8
Quest.
apps, right?
Yeah. I tried out an experimental build of OpenBrush, which is formerly TiltBrush, with the pass-through yesterday, and it's freaking great. And even one kind of tricky thing with pass-through is to get, like, if you want to do like partially transparent stuff, it's tricky to get that right, and they have it right somehow. So I'm gonna have to look at the code and see what they're doing.
Any other questions? Gone. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Next, we'll get Matt up here to drive, and I'll chime in once in a while. We attended the Meta Connect conference in VR for a while until it became non-beneficial to do so. Whoops, don't look at that. You close some of these. We're on the home stretch here, one deck left. This one, there it is. So you can clip this somewhere on your collar maybe, wherever you like it. I'll just hand hold this one. Let me grab my notes. This is your deck, you know what order it's in. And ask questions at any time. I'll come point a mic at you, or we'll repeat it if it's short enough.
There's a mic here. I'm telling you. In the pocket. So.
It doesn't have to be very close.
All right.
All right. The first few slides are yours, Zach.
Uh-oh. Where's the keynote stuff?
That's after your slides.
All right, let's do that first. Don't read any of this. Right there?
So I just kind of picked a bunch of random things from the keynote that I'm not sure everyone saw, so thought we'd go over a few things. But one of the biggest announcements outside of the hardware was that Microsoft is partnering with Meta for business integration with the Oculus platform. And they have like a storied history of doing enterprise functionality, which you've had experience with, where they say, okay, now we're going to do an enterprise program, and here it is. And then it's like, what, a year? And then they shut it down.
Yep.
And then they made another one.
Mark's done that too. Yep.
So we're on like, what, V3 or V4 now, if the Microsoft one
for
rolls
Meta,
out?
Facebook, yeah.
So as part of the partnership, it seems like it's still in the early days, so there isn't really anything solid about what they're actually going to offer. But the concept is that they're integrating with Quest Pro and Quest 2 for enterprise use across a lot of their software. So one of the examples is they're going to allow Microsoft 365 to work in VR. So you're going to be able to use Excel and Word and PowerPoint and like business applications and also Windows will work as like a virtual machine where you can like have a cloud-based computer that you can connect to and then load into the system. And again, these are all like pie in the sky kind of ideas. There's nothing that actually currently exists yet, but they showed off some interesting screenshots. So
An Apple keyboard?
I believe that's the only one that works, right? The only one that tracks.
There's also the Logitech one.
Yeah, he's got a Surface phone there, and he's got an Apple mouse, and then looks like a Mac.
The new MacBooks. Supposedly the new MacBooks don't track. Can you verify?
They do.
Yeah.
The 16 is
Yeah.
not today.
Soon.
So,
It used to on the Quest 2.
so in that vein, I personally hate Teams, but Teams is coming to VR.
And Zoom.
And Zoom, that's the other partner. So you're going to be able to like join a Teams meeting as your avatar, and then use face tracking and all that to like participate in like a meeting. They're also tying it in to Horizon Workrooms. So you'll be able to jump from Horizon Workrooms into a Teams meeting and back and forth. So they're trying to make it relevant to their own platforms as well. So there's some integration there. On the enterprise side, they're looking at actually integrating Microsoft's enterprise stack into software that can run on the system, both software that Microsoft produces, but also the developers are building using Microsoft platforms. So they're going to have Azure Active Directory, and they're going to have Microsoft Intune, which if you've the old school way of using Oculus for Business to deploy is gone, and Intune, if you're not familiar with it, is Microsoft's cross-platform tools for doing app deployment for enterprise. So you can basically push apps to Android, iOS devices, and now you'll be able to do the same thing for in theory, Quest 2 and Quest Pro. So your enterprise team, who's already used to using a tool to do mobile app deployment, can use the same tool to push content to VR headsets. If you were, and I mean the thing that's interesting about this is like, and we talked about this on some other IGDA channels, but it kind of sounds the death knell for HoloLens. Like it sort of seems like if they're going this far in another device, there's a murky history in HoloLens anyway with the previous person involved with it kind of leaving and
it's already been reorged, yeah.
So, but then they got into like a little bit of gaming and they're just like, Xbox Cloud Gaming is going to come and you're still going to be able to play on a giant virtual screen on your Quest 2 and Quest Pro, your library of games that are supported on Xbox Game Cloud. So that I think is interesting. Again, it's more in the entertainment space, but they were kind of like going back and forth between, here's our Microsoft as a whole, enterprise, a little bit of entertainment at the end kind of a thing. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are all the cloud gaming things.
You can. And you can play your Game Pass games on Steam Deck also. If you install the experimental Edge browser, that was specifically built by Microsoft so that you can log on to Xbox cloud gaming, and then you can play, you log in with your Game Pass account, and you can play all of your Xbox cloud streaming games on your Steam Deck. So.
And they're running on a Series X in a data center somewhere. So they look good, you just feel the latency on certain games.
Yeah.
So everybody fire up your conspiracies about when PSVR comes out and all of a sudden maybe there's a partnership here. Xbox historically hates VR completely.
We'll see. It's interesting. I mean, for sure, it's like you can play Xbox games on your VR headset,
Yeah.
or maybe that's not for sure. We'll see. TBD there. It's
Soon.
it's interesting for a keynote, maybe not reality. We'll see. They talked about legs. Personally, I don't care about legs, but there's a bunch of people that are very particular about legs.
There
and-
was keynotes and breakout sessions devoting to selling you clothes, and you're not going to ignore half your
And
body.
they went through the clothes. They went through the clothes pitch first.
Yeah.
Before they revealed legs. They were showing off hats and sweaters and all the different clothes you would want to wear in the metaverse. And then they're like, by the way, legs. So if you didn't get a chance to see it, I haven't seen any video representation of what they did actually in Horizons. So Zach and I were in together watching the entire arena or the stadium that you were in like transformed a bunch of times throughout the experience. And so when they went to this demo where they showed off legs, they like built in this 3D world and they went to like this little diorama. And so everyone like ran out of the seats down to the bottom floor to like get closer. And there was these 3D avatars walking around and jumping and ninja kicking, apparently, just to show off like it was all pre-recorded. It was fake, but
Yeah.
you know.
You notice when people ran down, like I'm that guy who sits in the front row, like I
Yep.
am here. And when I saw that happen, suddenly I saw these names appear in my peripheral vision.
Yep.
And then I started getting shoved around. Did you notice that a little bit? You get
No.
I got nudged just
I'm the guy
a
that-
tiny bit. That was weird.
I'm the guy that stayed in the second row to see above the name tags. We should say though, like this is the first year that the Connect conference has worked well in VR.
Yeah.
It worked very well.
We actually could group together. We could mute everyone else. We could just have it like, there were other people in the room, but we basically had the room to ourselves, basically, to talk. And there was a mode you could put on that was just party conversation mode. And so it would just mute everything, and you could just talk. And then occasionally you'd hear like a random voice every once in a while.
Yep.
People were zoning in for the first time.
And you could, a lot of the content was just 2D, but they would add 3D things off to the sides to kind of enhance it. And then this was fully 3D, which is why everybody bum
everyone
rushed to
ran
the
down.
stage.
So most of the time there was just a video, screen essentially. But they did like pull away the background occasionally and have like different skyboxes and 3D assets flying around, and they should replay it so people could go back in. But apparently I haven't seen any way to do that. I mean, I grabbed these screenshots from the 2D video, and you can't even tell that was a thing. Like they completely did a separate edit for the 2D side, so there isn't even any reveal that any of this was actually real 3D content.
So since this was pre-recorded, and you could go down on the stage with them?
No, just real close.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was like you could go to the end of the end of the stage basically, and then there was like this 3D set that was animated and it had voice, and the characters were lip synced to it and stuff like that. But it was obviously pre-made and just playing inside of it.
It is.
Yeah.
So there was a 3D model of Zuckerberg.
Yep, and he was jumping with legs. So he was
Normal.
he was just small. I thought he
Smaller
was
than
shrunk
us?
down. Yeah. I don't think he.
Isn't that normal?
Maybe it was just scale. Yeah, just the distance.
I think that might be
It was, but I mean, just like perception. Perception in the space. He didn't feel like he was a normal person height, at
Yeah.
the perspective that we were at. So,
Not very large, so that's why we had to all run to the front to get a good view.
but it was crazy because literally everyone, as soon as the room turned into 3D, like everyone jumped out and went to the bottom.
And
So it was
that's
just a giant
the difference
laser.
of why you would bother to use VR is to show 3D content, not a big rectangle.
Not a big 2D screen, right? Go figure.
Yeah.
Oh, something. Yeah.
I'm surprised they used mocap they'll never be able to pull off. But I mean,
The feed still slid around
quite a bit too.
Yeah,
they
and they
did.
didn't have shadows. There's a whole propaganda campaign about how terrible it was online if you want to go into the details. But it was like interesting, but it was very much smoke and
It's
mirrors.
just really weird that they were showing off a feature that's not a feature.
Yeah.
Yeah, not yet.
That's what that's.
Soon.
Sure, but they got so much stuff coming soon.
All of it.
Yep.
pretty
Well,
much.
just as an example,
Except Paul. Paul was there on day one.
Zach's going to talk a little bit about the body tracking stuff.
Yeah.
The avatar body tracking stuff has been like, it was like 2018 is when they announced it. And they said it's going to be out by the end of the year. And now it's almost 2023. So, and I think it's still not even finished. Like it's work in progress. Like it's available to use, but it's not a finished product yet. So, and that seemed like, to me at least, the theme of every talk that I watched was just like, here's this great thing, and maybe by the end of the year, but probably next year, or maybe the year after, it'll be done. And so they were talking about a lot of things that don't really exist. So,
And maybe one side note, because I'll forget it later. That's for all these things that have marketing attached. All the extensions to OpenXR dropped last week. There's finger tracking, eye tracking, face tracking, mouth tracking, all the extensions for the things that aren't there yet. They're out there.
yeah.
So
And I didn't grab a slide
if it's
for it.
purely
but
developer, purely technical, like it comes out. And then this other stuff, maybe not so much.
I didn't grab a slide for it, but it's interesting that, so basically as part of their partnership with Microsoft, they're doing Windows web apps, and they can run inside of the pass-through space. So you can have open applications that are built with web technologies that you could have around your screen. So you could like either have custom built, so you basically you could have like a Discord app, for example. Like they could make a version of that would run inside of Quest Pro or Quest 2. And it would just be, as something that you can move around in the space as like one of your windows. And I think that's pretty interesting because with the web browser, it's kind of like, it's hard to polish the Chrome and like have just like a dedicated experience. And so in this scenario, you basically have like these widgets almost that you can just have special, it's just a custom written application that's just for some augmented use inside of a work environment, or like you use it in a meeting, or use it for productivity reasons. So it's kind of interesting. And as a web developer, recovering web developer, I try not to do it as much as I can, but it kind of got me interested in that space. So.
And the stack is the Progressive Web App, PWA. Has anybody done that? All right. And one of the things to keep in mind too on the Quest Pro, with that extra RAM, you can pop a 2D web browser over any app, any VR app. You can bring up 2D web browser, and that can run a PWA. So that means Discord, that means music, that means whatever.
I think that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
They kind of, towards the end of the keynote, they kind of got into like bringing physical objects into the metaverse kind of thing. And so they were showing off some technologies that are super experimental. But one of them is basically you can use your phone to like, take a bunch of pictures, photogrammetry, the things we've all talked about before for like building objects. But then you can bring them in, and view them inside of, the VR environment. And they were showing off some of the examples of the fidelity that they're trying to reach. But again, it's in the future. Like the idea being that in your home space or your workspace, you could have, scanned in objects that are representations of real things. And they did like a weird thing where they're kind of using Spark AR, if you've ever heard of that. It's kind of their tool for, it's sort of like Lens Studio, which is, one of their competitors for doing AR content for like Instagram and, Facebook kind of uses. They were using that to kind of preview AR content. So they had like a way where you could, build stuff in Spark and then load it in onto a phone basically, and then kind of see how that model would look in kind of a real space or whatever. And you could project into a space through pass-through. So you could have like, they had like this plant example where they had scanned in the plant and they had a real plant, and you could set them side by side on a table and look around. Then they talked about codec avatars, which will be powered by the face tracking stuff that's in Quest Pro, and they were kind of talking through like the enormous amount of work it is to get them to work and to be interactive and stuff like that, and they kind of touched on it, the current state of that, Codec Avatar 2.0, and they had this example where they had the two views of the people are actually their avatars, and you can see that they're wearing prototype headsets, and
On a PC.
and they're able to talk and animate their characters. Their eyes blink and their cheeks move and their mouths move, and they have a more photorealistic, representation rather than the cartoon kind of characters that we're used to seeing. And they were saying like these are still again a ways off, but they showed off what they, and then of course this is Zuckerberg's version of that. So you can see just as an example of, they did a full capture of him, and then this was, if you watch the video keynote, this is like fully moving and talking with his voice and everything, and it's captured through.
This is a good clip to look up because it is convincing. Yeah.
So
That's because he looks so.
he looks like a robot?
No, the other two people, not him.
So as a kind of an in-between Kodak avatars and reality, they kind of showed off instant avatars, where you basically would take your phone and you would capture a video of yourself from a bunch of different angles, make a bunch of funny faces, and then that would spit out an instant avatar. And this would still be puppeted by the facial tracking system. It's just not quite the fidelity that you're going to get from Kodak avatars. But it was interesting because this is more feasible, like people already have phones, can scan themselves. The workflow of building this content exists rather than having to go to like a full production stage and have yourself body scanned, so that you can be there and as a fully 3D human.
And they did show kind of the capture thing. It was literally just a couple angles and then make weird faces that it tells you to do with your cheeks and your mouth.
If you watch the keynote, if you haven't, there's a section where this is all video and they go through the whole process.
It's like literally under 2 minutes, maybe a minute and a half.
It's
to
worth
get
watching.
One of these built. It's a little in the uncanny valley, especially the forehead doesn't move at all. But I mean, if you want to look like you.
Some people want to do that. I don't know. I went through a few of the talks, and probably like 15 or so, and just kind of the overall trend I got from just everything, like I said, was that we have all this cool new stuff, but it's just not done. It's not like we're going to talk about it, and there's talks about the hand tracking, there's talks about the even just controller and hands at the same time kind of a thing. Like they gloss over the fact that it's like some point in the future there's going to be an API release that supports that, but the technology can support hand and a controller at the same time, which is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. So I'm excited about that because I think there's back when we used Leap Motion hand tracking, now Ultra Leap, there was just something interesting about just purely using your hands, but like hand-based UIs have shortcomings, like gripping something and fully interacting with it. Like when we play games, we use a controller, right? And so there's like a symbiotic relationship between having one hand with something that has physical buttons and controls, and another hand that can just reach out and push things and swipe and stuff like that. And you get that kind of a tactile feel of physically interacting, but then you have the precision of a tool that you can use for like pointing at a thing and clicking a button and pulling a trigger. And it can, with one hand, it could become something where it's a gun, it's a hammer, it's you're just turning the tool into the tool that you need for whatever content that you're creating, and your hand is still your hand, and you can still do the intuitive things that you would want to do with your hand, which is like, pick something up and throw it, And the mix of that I think is really compelling. And I had asked Carmack about it, and he responded to me, and he basically said that on Quest 2 they couldn't do it because, and Quest 1 also, because they adjust the camera exposure specifically differently for hand tracking versus controllers. And so there basically wasn't a possibility of doing that in a way where it would be good with one and the other at the same time. And then probably processing power, because in the case of the new controller, it's basically got a Quest 1 in it, that's powering all of its mathematics, and then it's connected to Bluetooth and just sending telemetry data back out. So it has a ton more power than the dumb, Quest 1, Quest 2 controllers do. Side effect being that, it's going to go dead in like an hour,
No.
What is it? I mean, I've gone weeks on a Quest 2 controller. I'm just mortified to be using a that and be like,
So
oh,
they-
it's dead now.
They said up
10
to
minutes.
8 hours, and that means you're not using the haptics.
Yeah, if you run the haptics, I bet it's 2 hours.
And I don't think so. I got 4 hours out of them.
Okay, that's still bad compared to what we're used to.
Compared to months?
That's
yeah.
like HTC levels of, controller.
It's definitely a behavior change to put them on the dock when you're not using them.
So they talked a bit about hand tracking updates. So there's a whole bunch of SDKs that are updated now. Hand tracking 2.0, which has been announced for a while, but it doesn't seem like anyone was really doing anything interesting with it on Quest 2. It's one of the experiences that I want to run. I haven't. What's that?
Can't do this anymore.
You can't do that anymore?
On 2.0?
Wow.
No Vulkan.
But you can do this,
Yeah.
which you can't do on Quest 1. As soon as your hands get near each other, they disappear, right?
And 2.0 is actually getting pushed to Quest 1, which is
Okay.
interesting, and 1.0 is going to go away, which I don't know what that means for apps that don't update.
Yeah. And I haven't, mine.
I bet you they still work and you can't submit a new one.
I think it worked for free.
Yeah, but I think you can't submit a new version of your app until you upgrade to hand tracking 2.
My Quest Pro doesn't arrive until tomorrow because Meta screwed me with their stupid payment system, throwing a security flag, and then they tried to charge my card 3 times, and then it got canceled. My order got canceled. So I had to switch to Best Buy, so it's arriving tomorrow. But I'm pretty big on hand tracking, and so I want to do a comparison on hand tracking on Quest Pro compared to Quest 2 because
It's better, but it still gets tripped up when you do this. It feels like the hand
Yeah.
behind you gets wobbly and slow, and it comes back.
yeah, and then that's with using the updated hand SDK, the interaction SDK.
Unsure. No one knows. And they mentioned a 2.1, and I don't think that has a date.
Yeah, I did this first hand demo on Quest 2. It's available in the store. It's okay. Like, I think it has interesting interactions, but like, it still shows a lot of the shortcomings of just the current state of hand tracking on Quest 2. So like,
Wait, so this is something Oculus made?
yes.
Yep.
So it's built using the interaction SDK.
It's a sample project on GitHub.
And it's basically like a bunch of light gaming around like this interface. So you basically can like drag around on the screen with your finger. It's all hand tracking. So it doesn't use controllers. There's like a calculator, and it has the interaction system has like a button locking. So when you put your finger with hand tracking near it and push, it kind of gives you like it locks the controller like in place. And it provides like the right animation to give you like a more of a visual, tactile kind of experience of using a button kind of a thing. So there's a few things like that where you use like these physical kind of interactions that are part of the interaction SDK. And then it does gesture detection, so which is also part of the SDK. And so you have like an Iron Man kind of power where you there's targets in the space, and you kind of like open your hand, and once you've unlocked, you basically build this like. You have like phantom hands to start with, and you build like a glove. And then once the glove is physical, then you can like, unlock this Iron Man power where you can like throw beams of fire at targets and stuff. So
I thought that worked well.
yeah, the gesture detection I think worked better than some of the other things.
Yeah.
But the physical interactions, the locking is super nice. Like I do like the way that, and that again feels kind of stolen from MRTK because it does a lot of that kind of stuff to you, or at least from that space. And then, like at every Oculus Connect or Meta Connect or whatever, Facebook Connect, whatever they call it for the year, I've always gone to all the audio talks, and they finally this year it was very minimal. Like they kind of mostly just talked about like what I would consider like the basics of audio in VR, just over and over again. Like that's just kind of, and I get it. Like there's like a lot of new people in the space, so they're kind of going back to information that not everyone's maybe heard, but I've heard it like every year for the last 4 or 5 years. But about how basically spatialized audio adds so much to VR experiences. They kind of just, the first half of this talk is at least just, this is what spatial audio is, and it's, here's what HRTF is, and like all these kind of just going over the basic glossary of terms. But one of the new things finally in this, and this is also coming soon, it's not officially out yet, but it's coming in the next API update, according to this particular speaker, is that they have room acoustics. So the idea being that in addition to spatialized audio, you can have audio that bounces around, virtual surfaces, so wood and metal and stone, and those calculations are put it back into the audio, so it sounds like you're in a real space.
Oh.
And there's been, third-party software that could do that for forever, but this is the first time where they're just saying, we're building in functionality out of the box into the Oculus Audio SDK that will do this. And I don't know whether this is something completely new that they built or if it's something that they acquired.
You know a little bit about it? There was a
That's good. You want to build it.
There was a project called G Sound back in 2013 or something. This guy Carl Schisler was like a postdoc. This was his whole life, just working on acoustic simulation. He had a Unity project that his university was funding. Oculus bought him in 2018, so he's probably porting all that stuff over.
Okay.
Yeah, real-time room acoustics, similar complexity to real-time ray tracing, so it's why we don't have it yet.
And they've been since 2018, about the time when they were announcing when they were going to pivot from the old avatars 1.0, where they were just the old, no eyes, just fake different random glasses that you could pick from because they didn't have eye tracking or anything or any faked.
If you're keeping track, 1.0 was the third iteration of avatars. 2.0 is about the fifth. They've had some they didn't release.
So about that point, they announced that they were working on spatialized audio that would work in multiplayer scenarios. So you would have a room full of people, they were saying up to 20 avatars in a space where their voices would be spatialized, there would be room and reflections, it would be more of an immersive feeling audio experience. And that never came to be. It was the end of 2018, they're it's gonna be out in December. That came, I sent a message to Boss on Twitter and he's just I don't know what to tell you. Someday. And it seems like we're getting closer, but again, these few things are still TBD. They're gonna ship maybe by the end of the year, maybe not. So, but I think it's super interesting, and if you're working on content where you want to have one-on-one interaction, having room acoustics is a super powerful part. Makes you feel like you're in a place, rather than just mono audio. Then you turn your head and you're muted a little bit, Just another slide on hand tracking. They kind of did there's a few talks on it about specifically on the updates and then how it actually integrates into the interaction SDK. And so both of those talks are worth watching if you get a chance. I think that's it for my stuff.
Yeah. And then we did this great collab with Zero Design Reviews, so my slides are at the beginning. So let me back up.
I don't know what to tell you, Zach.
I got
Get started,
videos though,
viewers.
not this still image garbage.
What are you most excited about?
I got a mic. I'm not excited about the $1,500 device, obviously, but
You throw money at everything.
I throw money at everything. I've had omnidirectional treadmill, various things, but
It's your brand. Oh, okay.
I think the form factor, the better optics, and really just being able to use hand tracking and controller at the same time. Those are all the things that I'm most interested in. And that will also work on Quest 2. So at least that part, hand tracking combo with controller, would be available to a larger audience outside of everything else. So I think that is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you spend the $300, if you have a Quest 2, you spend the $300 and you get these. Can you actually do that right now? Can you pair these?
You can.
Okay.
I haven't tried, but yeah, people have.
But then you have a white headset and black controllers too, so I don't know if people are going to do that.
No
right?
good.
But I don't know. I think there's going to be compelling cases, and a few other things that I didn't make slides of that were interesting. Just before Zach starts, is that Quest Pro at least is being marketed again more as like a tool rather than entertainment. Yeah, and so Autodesk had, 3D modeling software, there's sculpting software.
Substance 3D
You know,
modeler.
Substance 3D modelers there.
Maya.
Like there's a whole ton of like creation tools in addition to the business applications that will set that device apart, I think, especially, it's gonna be super niche, but I think it'll gain some traction and it'll have a specific use case that's a better experience for those kinds of tools. So TBD, we'll see.
And Stan, you had a question?
Matt, you and I worked together on the motion capture system, a reasonably priced $1,500 system 5 years ago or something
Yep.
like that. Is something like that maybe a more advanced, simpler version, kind of what this whole egg thing is about, maybe? Or did you, any speculation on that?
So Meta's super against ever selling useful peripherals, but Pico 4 announced that they would sell accelerometers just for ankles, and so they'll need to be corrected by something, and probably AI training is at the point now where if you can just assume a flat floor, that as soon as the foot stops going down, for some amount of time, that's the floor. So I think it'll work out. I think they'll deliver it. I don't know much about them. I've never used Pico products.
I have the Cat VR, what are they called? Cat Locos, which are basically like a accelerometer. It's got like a sensor that you put on your hip, and then it's got a sensor that you put on each leg.
So you buy all the things.
And it's inertial, and I hate inertial stuff. Like it's just a mess. And so it tries to like guess what's going on, but it doesn't really know because its only cues are it has an accelerometer and a magnetometer, and so if you're swinging your foot like this, it's like it's moving, But when it stops, it doesn't know, is it in the air? Is it on the ground? Like, it doesn't have any position tracking. And there's ways around that, like there's tech that's starting to become that, and it will be interesting to see what Facebook's leg SDK ends up doing because
I have a video of their research.
they're going to interpret kind of like body shifts and different kinds of movements and then kind of make up where the legs are, basically.
I suck at slides.
They all have a shape.
So I'll just run through the things I'm excited about. Shared spatial anchors is something we've wanted forever and ever, and it's been hinted at, but now, like soon, and I believe they even said later this year, which I don't believe.
They did literally say that.
Yeah, okay, yep. And all that means is you've got a couple of headsets, and you've got a real world. What we did over there in the ice rink, and it's been refined to be a lot faster on a basketball court or tennis court. You find a physical marker, you get really carefully aligned with it, and you recenter your headset. 2 people do that. They're at the same position, they're facing the same direction. That's the super manual, air-prone way, which sometimes results in physical collisions. But they're now finally going to support software that will do a better job, because when you fire up your Quest and you see all those red lines showing all the furniture in your play space, it knows about your play space, and then it will never give you that information. It just taunts you with it. So they're going to essentially let you place a fixed anchor, which they do now for desks and chairs and limited kinds of furniture, and then share one of those across headsets. And what that means, it has to share the point cloud data. The other headset has to find the similar thing that it knows about, and then they'll merge into a shared coordinate space. So there will be some sort of a networking requirement, and the way they've been putting privacy before functionality, which they probably have to, it's just frustrating, means that you will never get access to that data. It'll be some opaque API in some server in a meta place that it does the data exchange between the APIs. But then it will be automatic, and you'll have this shared coordinate space, and then you can start saying, well, I mapped this chair over here, and map this table over here, and they'll be in the right spot. But none of this means it's going to tell you where tables are. You're still putting those in by hand. And that was, again, what I think this stylus actually used for. It's a faster way to do that. So here's the 2 examples they showed. This one's kind of a broad one.
Here you see a demo of collocated figures. They all have a shared frame of reference. They can share virtual content, like crystals.
Like crystals.
What makes this fun is it spaces something magical in reality with your friends and family right in your living room. an example from one of our early development partners, Peak Shapers. It's a co-located game with remote control tanks that you can play in your own home.
Now you're saying, self, you're playing tanks in a rectangle. I don't need shared spatial anchors or even a VR headset to play tanks in a rectangle. And you are right. But the one that appeared for a second and a half in the presentation, they're like, oh, it's so proud we got featured. And then here's their full trailer. It's awesome. Quest 2. Alignment problems and pass through.
All the offices now have a use.
All the malls. You don't need an office. Go to the mall for free.
Places without stairs, preferably.
You can map them. Put an X in front of them.
That's a pretty impressive scale of space.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, even on previous releases on Quest 2, if you clear out the entire Guardian cache, is that what they call the play spaces? You can go map your living room. Well, first, the most important thing is you make the maximum play space 10 by 10 meters that goes through walls and outside your house. And then you can go map furniture, and you can move between rooms. And you get that X-ray vision effect like HoloLens where you see, oh, there's my couch over there, and then you walk out and then your couch is there. It can do it. It already can do it. They just don't help you do it. You put every one of those pieces of furniture in by hand, and then every once in a while it forgets them all. So them setting up that, I would estimate that was like, after a lot of practice, that's like an hour. And then after a while, it forgot it all. And with...
Are you sitting at your desk? Are you sitting at your desk? You want to switch to desk mode?
That's right, yep. Yeah, so once you put these things down, it takes your position and tries to contextualize it. It's like, oh, you want to be in a chair? Oh, you want to be at your desk? And pretty soon you learn that you can't put those anywhere near your actual play space.
So one person could map the room, like if we wanted to have a REM 5 spatial ops, and then we all just bring and buy a copy of this and bring our Quest 2.
That's
play
why
here.
the spatial anchor is such a big deal. Without the shared spatial anchors, every headset's on its own, and the only sharing of anything is that you stood in the right spot and aligned really well. And if you didn't, the farther you walk, you'll be going that direction instead of this direction. Or like Paul didn't experience, but his friends experienced, you take off the headset and put it back on, and the software's like, oh my God, you should check your alignment. And people are like, nah, it's fine. And then wham. It sounds like a football tackle. It's really scary because there is no slowing down because you don't see anything. But that's where the pass-through can kind of help you out and give you a clue that something's going wrong. So yeah, so that's the big deal is one person can do it, or simultaneously we could do it, work on different parts and see the progress.
It might be fun to try that here sometime.
Oh yeah, like global game jam time. So that's the one I'm most excited about. And then here's the part where I can't work slides with videos in them. The Movement SDK came out a week ago. Did anybody try it? SDK 64 dropped a week ago. Movement SDK contains body tracking API. Ooh, body tracking. And you go into the documentation, it shows a full skeleton. And then you go a little farther, and then you get to the list of bones. They're like, oh, 70 bones, that's got to have legs and feet. And most of them are copies of finger bones, about 40 of them. So here's what you get, though. Here's what's new is you get those same IK arms, but they've been AI trained to not do weird stuff. So it is still just half a body. Let's see if I can full screen this. There we go. But really sudden things that would screw it up before don't. And it's a little bit smarter about...
Is a huge part of social
Where did this video come from? Was it 2-minute videos, 1-minute videos? That guy? Best accent on the internet. So it's a little smart about not turning your torso. Like that's one of the big things that you see in social VR is they just kind of guess. It's like, oh, the head turns, so yeah, why not? That's what you did. So that's what just dropped.
And this is basically what they announced in like 2018,
Yep.
because they had it working with their avatars, and they were trying to push their avatars on everyone. And all the devs were like, we want your tech, but we want to make our own avatars. So they kind of pivoted into like taking the SDK that has all the position information and allow you to then just use that to
Skeleton.
drive your own stuff.
Yeah, with your own model.
And they're kind of doing that still, but they're also trying to just make everyone use meta avatars also at the same time. So those two things are competing. It'll be interesting to see.
But between the movement SDK with body tracking, Zuckerberg jumping, and what's her name, karate kicking, and the fact that they released this research paper about a month and a half back, here's what we thought we were getting. This is driven entirely by a Quest 2, no other hardware.
I bet you have to dance like that, though, to actually
You can
make
only
it-
dance like that. It only does dancing. You see a little latency. It does have to interpolate, so there's a little bit of lag compared to what we have right now. But look at those legs. That's passable.
That's better than most inertial data.
Yeah, it is. So that's what we thought we were getting. That's why the internet got a little bit angry again. But they were already angry because they can't afford a $1,500 headset. And I don't blame them. One last one. I'm not going to hit the forward arrow. What do I do? It's,
Click on the slide first.
thanks, man. Liar.
You gotta focus the slide. You're focused on the iframe.
I don't know. Okay, I tracked foveated rendering. This got all out of whack because Carmack said some things, and people are like, he said it's bad. And what he was trying to say is it's not 20 times faster. That was an extrapolation in a research thing that's going to happen in 20 years. This is slightly faster than what we already have. So today there's fixed foveated rendering that takes advantage of the fact that the lenses suck so bad that if your eye looks to the outside, it's blurry. So why bother to render that well? So there is literally a box of blurry that just follows your head around. You put that on the new lenses that are good, and you can see it. So instead, they track your retina and only render a square in high resolution. So that's kind of showing the tracking. And this is data you'll never see again. It's what actually the infrared cameras see inside the headset.
Which isn't exposed to the SDK.
Or anyone.
One trick if you want to see what it's rendering like that,
Mm-hmm.
we found this by accident. We had a texture that went bad, and it was just a bunch of thin lines next to each other, and then you can clearly see where that's happening.
Okay.
So, like Moria pattern kind of.
So it is faster than fixed foveated rendering, but more importantly, you can't use fixed foveated rendering on Quest Pro or anything like Quest 3 in the future that has pancake lenses. It's just not super duper amazing. It's like a little better. That was his whole point. And one title, just to prove a point, did drop on Quest Pro release day that has it, and is really hard to spot, of course, in a video. Let me find a good example here, and I'll pause it. So I had it for a second. Okay. So right here, this is like super duper blurry. The eye is probably like right in this area. And the whole point is, when it's your eye, you don't see it at all.
Because you're looking at the high detail.
Yeah, only your 2% of your field of view can see high detail. So it's in there, it works.
So what you're saying...
Not as terrible, it doesn't work, and we'll never have it.
What you're saying is all of our YouTube videos are going to suck now because they're only going to have a small
Oh,
section.
there's a good example. There's your Moria pattern. It's
Yep.
aliasing different than it does elsewhere. Yeah. The other thing Carmack said, and is in here, is it's hard to activate the dynamic dimming appropriately to get even better blacks. The contrast and the color saturation is there all the time, but to get the blacks of actually dimming the backlight, special flags in the SDK. This has it. Has anybody played it? Probably not. It's been out for a day.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, this will be on the list for the weekend. This is by far Red Matter 2. By far the best technical developer all the way since the Oculus Go.
Yeah,
Yeah, but they didn't update it for Quest Pro-ness.
it's still good. It's
Yeah.
it's the best.
I think it's on sale too.
Yeah, it's the best quality in terms of like running on mobile hardware of a game, like visually.
Yeah, I should show that.
Like
I
it
don't know.
has like real like faked but really decent reflections and and lighting.
I don't know if we'll see any of that. Yeah, so on the
Whereas
floor
most
here,
things are just all baked. And
like
they do a
these
lot of
reflections
dynamics.
actually move on the floor. Not that they'll show your character in them necessarily, but the things they are showing move like they should.
Yeah, if you watch, a 2-year-old Oculus Connect, they do everything that they say not to do in red matter and pull it off without dropping frame rate. So it's pretty impressive from that standpoint.
Yeah, so any random questions, Connect stuff you heard about?
What was it? They hinted at the Control Labs thing.
Oh yeah.
Anyone find any news on that?
No. There's a guy in town that works on that.
Really?
Yeah, he does kind of the training.
Magic wristband that interprets your
Yeah.
voice.
Yeah, so that was another thing in the keynote that might be interesting to folks that have never seen it. They bought a company called Control Labs that had a working prototype that they demoed to journalists. Like they'd show up not knowing how to use it, and it'd be working within an hour kind of a thing. So it's just intercepting nerve impulses at the wrist. And the neat thing is you could train it quickly. You would start by doing the normal gestures you would do, and then eventually, because nerve impulses don't necessarily have to move muscles, you just make those smaller and smaller, and then the example they had in the keynote, they just had their hand on the table and you didn't see anything, and they were still controlling the video game, but they were doing slight twitches or almost twitches that they had trained this hardware to handle. So the whole point is when you're walking around with your glasses on the bus in the public, you're not going to be like going like this and minority reporting everything. You're just going to have your hand wherever, and it's going to do little twitchy things and control the UI for you. You're not going to be shouting, hey, Facebook, hey, Alexa.
Okay, Google.
Yeah. And one of the coolest things is, that's worth looking up, even the Control Labs, CTRL Labs, is that they had these interesting examples where people didn't have hands, but they still have arms up to the wrist, and they could control a virtual hand. And then they had the demos where it actually takes so long to activate a muscle, the virtual hand would move before the fingers. They had to slow it down, and then they showed, the journalists are like, no, that's dumb. And they're like, and then they'd turn it off, and they'd see that the screen moves before they move their finger. So it's really interesting. So it's super low latency, and it needs to train, though, because everybody's nerves are in different spots. And that's why it's still not for sale.
I tried that demo actually, because
Really?
I was working at, it was called Facebook Reality Labs,
Mhm.
but the concept design team there. So it was not designed for my tiny forearms and
Oh,
definitely needed the
too loose?
training. So it was really hard for it to tell the difference between fingers. So a lot of the demo was doing this
Okay.
and it interacting with the screen. But yeah, it was,
So-
I don't know, not as good as what they were showing the press.
Interesting. How many people got to try that? There, like a lot?
I had like 20 people
Okay.
internally, at least at that event. So just dog fooding, basically.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Cool. Yeah, so that's probably a ways off.
Yeah.
I do too. Yeah.
Question. Obviously, like it's interesting to watch looking at the popular press talk about this and how much they hate Facebook and they can't
Yeah.
separate it, and they think that Meta Horizon is like the metaverse. But that aside, I'm curious what you think. How much they're going to open up because this is a pro device designed for work. So things like maximum guardian size is limited, doesn't
Yeah.
need to be. And like, do you have any thoughts on how many of those walls are going to fall with this device only?
Yeah, that's interesting. So some a little bit have. So like Mark's talking about all the nannying they try to do in the software versus like when we had the Oculus for Business. One of the options was you turn it on and you never have a guardian set up. You never have anything. Just you say, I'm not going to do dumb stuff. I'm going to be careful. And then you click that once, and until reboot, nothing. So you take the headset off, wherever you put it back on, that was the center of your new play space. It's the way the old Google Daydreams used to work. So when I was out there walking down my driveway into direct sun, for warranty reasons, I never did this. I heard about a guy that walked out into the street, and there's just a thing that was just kind of like, stop it, set up a guardian. So they used to black out after 5 seconds on consumer devices. So it's a little bit there. But still, some amount of people will do weird stuff. Hard to say. I feel like they could set an automatic circle of a reasonable size. The current one is like 3 feet or something. Doesn't fit your arms. so like 10 feet. But
I
with
think-
that pass-through, like, you should not get hurt as easy. Yeah.
I think they've been terrible so far. They have a terrible track record of doing business services.
That's true too.
Microsoft maybe.
And I think with a partner like Microsoft, they could remedy that. Now, that's super ultra corporate too. You know, it's like, it's not.
We don't want to go teams. Like
Yeah. But I think that from when the meta switch happened, they kind of focused like, we are the metaverse, right? Even their naming is kind of, you know, very arrogantly like, you know, meta, like literally we're trying to be everything. But I think the current approach is kind of tamed down a bit and more of just like, they're thinking about it as parts. And I think the interesting thing about Microsoft as a partner is that they've been acquiring a lot of IPs. So like if you're thinking about a metaverse like Ready Player One, if that's your jam, if you want to mix and match a ton of different game universes, like it's not finalized yet, but they own Blizzard and they own, you know, all the Call of Duty titles. Like I'll think of the scope of all of the game, you know, genres that they have and then the IPs that they have access to. And so with a partner like that, there's an opportunity to like throw a whole lot of content that makes everyone else want to play too, because, you know, there's a starting point at least that has so much content that it feels more like something that you could jump into and add your own IP to, rather than, you know, we have this natural tendency is in the entrepreneurial space of like, no, I'm going to build my own and I'm going to control it all and I'm going to do all that. And like, I think in the metaverse space, the ultimate play is that there has to be collaboration. Like it has to be a mix of things and it needs to be fluidly moving back and forth. So that's maybe a stretch for like, you know, all the businesses that are going to be involved with making the decisions that are needed to have to pull that off. But just from like, if you're going to partner with somebody who has a ton of content to throw into like entertainment space, they picked a good one. So.
And a couple of things that we forgot to mention. One of the things that got scoffed at, of course, was the NBC partnership, because, oh, we get Peacock on the Quest, so we can watch those shows. But the other thing they announced was they're going to take all the good IPs and they're going to start building like Horizon World Spaces with them. And actually, Colin, that used to live here, Colin Cody Waters, just got hired to do exactly that. Not necessarily for NBC. He could be working on Cheetos. That's another one they did.
Yeah.
But
and I think in that vein, it's like the kind of the flaw, in my opinion, of Horizons, outside of the fact that they restart it every 2 years and throw it out and start over, is that it's not, and maybe the clothing will be the thing that throws it over the edge, but it's not really built in a sustainable way for you as a content creator to jump in and make money doing it. So why are you going to invest the time to make content in that space? Because the only person that is getting a benefit from that in the current way is Meta. So there has to be some way where content creators can make a profit off of it.
They have the beginnings of that, but
and
you can
when they
sell
first came out,
items.
their big picture was like, you can impress your friends with the crazy things you make, and that only goes so far. You know, that's not sustainable.
And the other thing they announced was you can actually import 3D meshes and textures through some sort of weird pipeline.
That'll exist later this year or next year.
There's one thing on Facebook that does it now, but you have to go on Facebook. It's weird.
But I mean, like, they tried to turn it around and they tried to create this creators program where, like, if you could prove that you have the chops, they would pay you some money. But again, that's not a sustainable thing. That's not something that you're going to dedicate making content to that you don't own, basically. So I think if they're trying to entice people into that space, it has to be financially, you know, beneficial to the people who are going to create the content.
And then the other tool,
and that's ongoing, you know, money basically too.
The other Horizon tooling announcement is they're going to support web client and TypeScript. And with the web client, I hope this year means keyboard. But whether or not it does, you know, TypeScript you can paste in there, and you could probably version control it somewhere. What a concept!
We did our last Global Game Jam. We experimented with Horizons one year, and then the previous year I think we did Rec Room. And it was kind of night and day tools-wise. Like there's cool things about about Horizons, but it just still eventually felt tedious. Like, I just wanted to go to my computer and make all the stuff and jump into it and check scale and do all the actual, test gameplay. But like, spaghetti coding where I have to like make myself really huge and run across the universe and drag this wire and plug it into this thing, it just was it felt tedious. Like, it was just
To a developer, yeah.
And we did the same thing in Rec Room. Rec Room has their circuits, and we were using circuits 1.0 at the time, which they're binary circuits, so they're super limited. Like, you're just checking, if 0 is equal to 1 the entire time, basically, for everything you make, essentially. And after we spent 2 days, doing that for like long periods of time. And again, I was just like, I want to just go back to the Unity editor and just do the tedious stuff. I want to code. I don't want to use visual things to try and make it work, because it took 40 times longer, and it didn't always work, and then you had to iterate on it. And now Rec Room literally has a Unity SDK where you can just import it in, you get all the libraries, you can write code. It's private beta, yes. But you can use the tools you're used to using to build content. You can integrate that into your existing art pipeline with your 3D modeling team and make content and bring it in, rather than like
and version control it.
Training them how to use this special tool that 3D prints cubes and then make those cubes look like interesting things, I don't know, it's just not, it's interesting, but I think it's got lots of flaws, so.
So maybe last call for questions, and we'll wrap it up. Anything?
Was there Q&A for Carmack? Like,
No,
VR?
he was pre-recorded. Yeah. The Carmack talk this year is worth watching, even if you have washed out of previous talks, because he's only 20% working at Meta now. He does mostly AI. So it's very focused. Like, there was just one set of topics. And then there was topics he absolutely wouldn't touch, like face and eye tracking. But he talked about screens. He talked about trade-offs with the controllers, and talked a lot about the CPU and GPU changes. What else? I forget. Those are the ones that I wrote down. But in particular, like, the screen isn't quite maxed out its capabilities yet. There's still stuff that it can do. They just have to figure out what SDK they'll want to expose to do it. The localized dimming, the true blacks, was the one they already exposed, but there's another one where they can use a broader range of colors. It's not a 10-bit HDR panel, but it can do a wide gamut of colors. Okay, well, it's, what?
One last thing.
Yeah.
Setting it, like when you buy a HoloLens and set it up, you sign into it, and like you can do anything you want. Like, you don't have to keep hitting OK on things. It was surprising to go from turning on the Quest to getting into Horizon Workrooms to see how that works. How many times you have to agree to what's going to happen in your information and what they're never going to do. I just thought that was striking, and it's crazy how many there are. I don't know if you experienced that or noticed that, but or not. So that feels like not a work device. It feels like it's still, they're treating it like a consumer.
Well, it's because they said we're going to have every consumer device able to do this, but now we got to protect the consumers from bad app devs and us. Reminded me of the one thing that I totally forgot to mention. You definitely want to, as people that have devices and set them up, you want to go check out the new ODH features. They can now completely script wipes, reboots, account creation. They can bypass all the setup steps. They can automate all those, and you can do it with the new ODH. It's insane. Like, they've actually paid attention. To be fair, they had that as a separate app that they only allowed the Oculus for business people to use. You could literally take an app and hit a thing and set up 15 headsets and go get a lunch break. Now that is a thing for everybody. And it only took 3 or 4 or 5 years. But, all right, let's call it a wrap. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Say goodnight to Scott.
Good night, Scott. We miss you.
We'll pour out a lemonade for you.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Is he? Okay.
Yeah, he was.
Is this whole presentation available online?
Yep, hopefully.